Hi, this is Jeff Herbst, President of American Jewish University. We'll begin in just a few moments, just waiting for our last few participants to join us. Hey, good afternoon. My name is Jeffrey Herbst. I'm President of American Jewish University in Los Angeles. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of our Bayahad Together, spirited by AJU digital platform. Since the pandemic crisis began, AJU has offered dozens of programs that seek to educate, inform, and entertain using the most recent technology possible. We've been delighted by the tens of thousands of people who have joined us for the programs, and we hope that you'll continue to participate by looking at our weekly offerings at aju.edu. Thanks so much for joining with us. Today, it's a real honor to be joined by Paul Levine. Paul, of course, is a best-selling author of 22 novels that have sold millions and millions of copies over 30 years. I'm going to be talking with Paul about his most recent book, Cheater's Game. And the title of the session is Turning the College Admissions Scandal into a Best-Selling Novel. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a pleasure to be here. We'll have some fun.
Absolutely. Paul, let me ask you first, you've had characters who you've carried over the decades, but the topics of the novels have obviously changed over time. What motivated you to focus on the college admissions scandal?
Last year, when the scandal broke, which was March 2019, I read the initial stories, LA Times, New York Times, and the nightly news, and I was just stunned by what I was hearing and what I was reading. But here are these parents, and that's what I was focusing on, who were well-educated, well-respected, wealthy, who were participating in a conspiracy to lie, to cheat, and to bribe their kids' way into college. It didn't make any sense to me. It just astounded me. So usually I write crime fiction that's a murder trial. Obviously, nobody got killed when kids are cheating or their parents are cheating or bribing their way into college. But the moral issues, the ethical issues interested me. And that was the hook.
We'll get into the substance. And as you say, the book is replete with examinations of moral quandaries. But, well, maybe you could tell the audience a little bit about, okay, from the moment you read about the scandal, you obviously had to do a lot of research. As someone who's had two admissions departments report to him, everything in the novel seemed, this is hopefully a compliment, accurate in terms of the process of admissions. How do you go about turning an idea, in this case your outrage over the scandal, into the novel?
Well, I started with the legal documents. The government filed these lengthy indictments against the parents, of course, against the mastermind of the scheme who had already pleaded guilty. And maybe I should just remind everybody what it's about. I'm so steeped in it that I assume everybody following it, and I know everybody knows about it. But essentially, the Los Angeles fella, his name is Singer, who was pleaded guilty, and then wore a wire to trap his clients. What he did was he was essentially selling admission slots at UCLA, USC, Stanford, Yale, Wake Forest, a whole bunch of Georgetown, a bunch of places through what he called the side door. And here, I'll give you in a miniature his pitch. You're a father of somebody, you want your son or your daughter to go to USC, but it looks like they're going to get admitted to SMU, their safety school, and maybe not USC. So he says, well, you know, there are three doors. There's the front door. If your son or daughter has a 1600 on the SAT and is a 4.0, maybe you'll get in the front door. There's the back door. If you've given $5 million or $10 million as a donor, that's the back door. But you can't do that. But I've got a side door. And through his side door, he would bribe coaches at the universities who had a special little route to admissions Now, maybe, Jeff, they didn't do this at Colgate, so I'm going to exclude Colgate from this.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But they did it at USC and UCLA because we know through court documents, and a lot of places. And I mean, really, really, the elite universities have for many decades favored children of donors, athletes, and legacies. We just know that it's accepted. And what Singer's genius, evil genius, was to create a scheme to do it where he gets paid, he bribes coaches, he bribes some admissions officers, or he bribes proctors for the college boards to let his ringer come in, which really interested me. Somebody who could come in and you needed a 1375 on a test, he could get you 1375 by correcting answers that he's allowed admission by a proctor is being paid off. Well, this is sort of delectable crime fiction. It's not fiction. So to answer your question, I start with court documents, plus the excellent reporting that was done by the LA Times, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. And now I know exactly what happened, and now I can put my characters into that situation.
So you chose to approach it in a very interesting way, which is, of course, your main character over many decades, Jake Lassiter, has a nephew who participates in the SAT rigging. Why was that so it was really about the corruption of the standardized test process in good part that a lot of the book focuses on. Why did you take that angle? Was it something about the tests? Have you thought about these tests in the past and their role in society and admissions?
Well, yes. And now we know that some of the elite universities are saying they're not even going to require the college boards anymore, the SAT and the ACT. You probably know way more about those exams than I do. But to me, what interested me were two things about it. One, how easy it was to bribe somebody at the West Hollywood location where they're giving the exam and let this brilliant guy who is a tutor in real life at IMG Academy in Sarasota, Florida, come in, a Harvard graduate, former tennis pro. You pay him $25,000 and he'll get you the score you want on the test. It was just, there's something fascinating about that, how easily corrupted it is. And then there's the whole other issue, which I don't have the time in fiction to get into, is what good are those tests anyway, and how much weight should we give them? But in fiction, I had already had Lassiter with his nephew Kip. It established Kip in earlier books as being kind of a brilliant but a little bit offbeat kid. And he's a kid in fiction who got a 1600 on his SATs, went to Penn, had a problem there. And now he starts as a tutor, an academic tutor, a college board tutor, and he ends up as this ringer, this imposter, taking the test. And his uncle, Lassiter, the lawyer, who's been around for 30 years in these books, has to defend him in what really on its face is an unwinnable case. The kid did everything that was charged in the indictment. That did raise another question, which we can get into, that interested me, and that is, what's the difference between something that's immoral, unethical, and shady? We could all agree that everybody who participated in this scheme did things immoral, unethical, and shady, and what's a federal crime?
Right. Let me just remind the audience, I'm talking with Paul Levine, best-selling author about Cheater's Game, his new novel about the college admissions scandal. I'll be talking with Paul for about 15 or 20 more minutes, then we very much welcome your questions. Please submit them through the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Paul, let's go back to the issue you just raised about something can be unseemly, you used immoral. In the book, you refer to something called the Texas verdict, which is not guilty, but don't do it again.
Right, right.
So how do you work your way through? Because the book is a kind of long mediation on what to do about something which seems, as you say, immoral, but the legal community didn't have the imagination to quite think of it as a crime, or we decided it wasn't a crime. So how have you thought through that process? Because there's obviously a whole set of issues of things that you can do that you shouldn't do.
Right. And in the macro view of all of this, it's what is the government's role in policing things that we agree are shady or unethical? Should you go to prison for those kinds of things? I thought the government, reading their indictments and reading the memos of law that were shooting back and forth, really stretched to create mail fraud and wire fraud as the underlying crime that these parents committed. That is, as I say in the book, that's sort of the grab bag that the federal government uses when they can't say, oh, you robbed a bank. We have a federal statute about bank robbery or kidnapping. But there is no federal statute that says thou shalt not cheat on the SAT exam. Right. So they find this. I have one character say to another in the book, when Lassiter says, I don't see mail fraud here. What's mail fraud? Oh, I'll tell you what mail fraud is. You go to Hawaii and you write me a postcard. Ray, having a wonderful time. Wish you were here, but you're having a lousy time. You lied, and you don't wish I was there. Government would say that's mail fraud. Now, obviously that's ridiculous, but is it? And the government really got a little carried away, I thought, with the press conferences and this nationwide conspiracy, huge scandal. There are about 16 million college students in the United States in about 50 of these cases. Well, the government has this great advantage that it has the pulpit, and they had the advantage that they had celebrities, they had well-known actresses, they had well-known wealthy people, chairman of a major law firm in New York, owner of vineyards, real estate developers, and the American public, and I'm with them, have this sort of schadenfreude when we see these people in trouble. You know, the mighty have fallen. But that doesn't answer the question, was it a federal crime? Now, 30 of the 50-some people have pled guilty, so that doesn't actually prove it's a federal crime. What that proves is they're afraid to go to trial and have their lawyers make the technical arguments that no property was deprived, an admission slot is not property under federal law, because the jurors are made up of people like me who say, yeah, you know, I'm not going to say not guilty, but don't do it again. I'm going to say guilty. And that's why people are pleading guilty.
Paul, in the book, you have a wonderful scene where a variety of these parents come to testify as to what they did and what they did for their children. And you describe the parents as wealthy, totally amoral. What did you think as you saw, you described the schadenfreude on the part of the American public, but what did you think as you saw these parents first get arrested and then many, as you say, plead guilty? Did you take this as aberrations, something that could be understood as to what lots of people would do for their children if they could? How did you understand it?
I spent a lot of time thinking about these very questions in two things. I read a lot of the wiretap transcripts, really, and they were pretty appalling because the parents, when they're talking to Singer, the mastermind, weren't saying, but is it right for me to do this? They were saying, can we get caught? And of course, they didn't know they were being recorded as he was leading them down the path. And then I was struck by this question, which I asked myself. What message were these parents sending to their kids? Well, multiple messages. Number one, connections are what's important. your talent isn't important because you don't have enough. You can't cut it without me writing checks to bribe people. What kind of message is that to send your kids? And there was an interview with one of the parents who, while he was serving a short prison term, about 90 days, and he became very introspective. And he said this, and this really hit me. I realize now I wasn't doing it for my son, who was being portrayed as a water polo player, though he could barely swim, right? I was doing it for myself. I wanted to say at a cocktail party, yeah, Junior just started at USC. And his son was interviewed, and he said, I said to my father, Dad, why didn't you just trust me? So this is kind of heart-wrenching, and I think it partially answers your question that some of these parents were basically saying, you know, faking it is making it. Cut corners, ends justify the means, whatever cliches we can apply to this kind of conduct that ought not to be encouraged.
Do you think this represents something new? Do you think it's always been there and we didn't know about it, or it wasn't as easy to pull off? Or do you think this reflects a certain amorality of the era?
Well, I think it isn't all that different than the regular admissions process, which I think needs reforming. And I think that Singer, the mastermind, was able to convince parents that, you know, if you can go in the back door with a big contribution, why shouldn't you go in the side door? If I pay the soccer coach $100,000 and you pay me $100,000, we'll get your child in. What's the big deal? And the soccer coach is going to give some of that money to the university. So everybody's happy. So maybe we should separate development, the part of the university called development, which is a nice word for fundraising, from admissions. Just erect a wall in between admissions and development. If donors want to give money, there's no quid pro quo. Yeah, you put your name on the building. That should be enough. Not that your grandchildren get a pass. So make admissions a meritocracy would be my answer to the question.
Talking with Paul Levine, author of Cheater's Game. I'll be asking Paul a few more questions, and we'd very much like to hear from you as part of our B'Yahad Together, Spirited by AJU series. We've had wonderful questions from the audience. I hope you'll submit yours. Paul, I'm curious, have you talked since the book came out with any college president, any other college presidents, admissions people? What's been the kind of reaction from the higher education sector, if you've received one at all?
No, I've spoken to the dean of one of the colleges at Penn State, who told me that there's a kind of a flip side to this, and that is that when the parent comes to you and says directly, what will it cost me to get my child in? Would $250,000 do it? And she had to tell him, we don't do it that way. There is no quid pro quo. And his child actually was turned down and turned up at another university, and through public documents, she saw that he in fact did give $250,000 to that university. This is not shocking. I mean, we're not shocked by any of this. Now, that's not a crime, I don't think. It's an accepted practice. So again, there are shades of gray in all of this.
Well, an important line in the book, I think it's actually repeated twice, is, although I think it's attributed to within the book, it's attributed to another fictional book. It says, maybe all you ever get for integrity is the largest kick in the ass the world can provide. Is that cynical? Is that a coda?
Well,
focus on that, and it is repeated again later in the book.
Yes, that's quoting the wonderful Florida author John D. MacDonald and his character Travis McGee, who I think in the rest of that quote, it comes from a book called The Turquoise Lament.
Yes.
and the rest of that quote says, I can bend things way, way over, but there's a place past which I can't bend them or won't bend them. And that's his code. And maybe all you get for integrity is a kick in the ass. Well, that's what you do.
Paul, the character Kip, Lassiter's nephew, goes through a transformation. He's briefly jailed. He goes through this traumatic experience. Do you think he truly repents? Is that what you wanted to portray? How did he understand his moral transgressions, whatever the criminal justice system had to say?
I think that I left it open as to what he really believes, but he tries to convince his uncle that he is repenting, and in fact, he is going to create now, he's a sort of a genius, kind of a savant, study help for underprivileged children taking the college boards, as opposed to being an imposter and taking the boards for rich kids. Maybe we'll have to wait till the next book to see.
Okay.
Whether he repents.
I'm going to pick you up. That's a teaser, which we'll pick up at the end. What was the thing that you did a lot of research? You read court briefs, you read the wiretaps, you heard the participants talking unedited. What was the thing you learned that was most important to you while researching and writing the book about college admissions, the characters, and the like?
Well, I'll go back to the beginning, and I sort of went through a process from being shocked, appalled by what the parents did. Then in reading the transcripts, and this may seem to contradict everything I've said before, I think some of the parents really thought, is picking up on something you said earlier, that this is what you do if you love your kids a lot. And some of these parents who were wealthy did not start wealthy. They didn't come from wealthy families, but they made a lot of money, and they wanted their kids to have advantages that they might not have had. That doesn't excuse the conduct, but you know, we form these impressions really quickly from the news media. The stories come out, and as I said, I was appalled, I was shocked, I was naive, and yet these parents did not hold up a bank. They didn't shoot anybody. They were using their power, influence, and money to try to help their children in a way that I think we can all agree they shouldn't have done. But I started having a little bit more empathy for them.
This is Jeff Herbst talking with best-selling author Paul Levine about Cheater's Game, his new novel about the college admission scandal. In just a minute or two, I'll go to the Q&A. Please submit your question. Paul, let me ask you, as part of my last questions, a little bit about football.
Yeah.
So, Jake Lassiter, your main character, is deteriorating mentally, physically, but especially, I think the most poignant passages are mentally, to hits he attributed from his college football playing career a couple of decades before. I've obviously dealt with this issue. Let me ask it this way. Since you've been studying, involved with football for a long time, would you tell parents that their kids can play football today, given how you portray the character deteriorating?
Well, this is a tough question. And I wouldn't propose to tell anybody what to do with their kids. But I do think that CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, is posing a real danger both to young people who are only going to play at the high school level and to college and NFL players. And my character, Lassiter, who played decades ago at Penn State and had a relatively short career with the Dolphins, but on the suicide squad. So he was running full speed on the kickoff team and doing helmet first tackles when that was still permitted, and had a series of concussions. We haven't seen the end of this problem. We don't have a cure for it. It is a degenerative brain disease. And if you really have that, It is fatal. And we've seen, and talk about the Dolphins, Nick Monicani died recently. Earl Morrall died likely from CTE. We have Junior Seau. There are so many right now, NFL stars of yesteryear. And now we're discovering that girls who play soccer suffer concussions. And 20 years from now, I question whether there will be tackle football at the high school level, no matter what I say one way or the other. And I love football. And if there's not tackle football at the high school level, how can there be college and professional football? We know the answer, it's not safe for helmets. Helmets don't protect against it. Helmets keep you from fracturing your skull. They don't keep the brain from flying through the skull and bruising itself as when you hit something. So I don't know the answer to that question.
You've obviously spent a lot of time, though, looking at the science. Lassiter's fiance is a scientist herself who's studying the concussion issue. So you've obviously delved pretty deeply into this literature.
Yes, and I modeled her as a combination of a couple of the actual neuropathologists who are researching this and trying to come up with something that can cure what is really a disease. It's a brain disease. It's a buildup of these proteins which destroys the brain, and it's horrible.
Let's go to our questions, and the audience is now submitting questions to Paul, and I'll read some of them. One question: do you think all this recent expose about the admissions process will actually curtail this sort of thing, or just force it underground?
I think that standards are going into place to protect against it. And I think that it probably has been going on before Singer's plan that now has fallen into the federal court system, but that admissions officers, proctors, and coaches now would be afraid they're going to go to jail, which is something nobody probably ever thought before. They were risking their jobs. So I do think that this particular form of bribery is going to go away. I guess you can never stop students and parents from fabricating resumes. I'm sure that's going on for a long time. And Jeff, you would know more about that than I would.
Another question. Part of the book is obviously a kind of deep mediation on the admissions process and how much of a meritocracy it is. And this particular story is about the process being subverted. But one of our audience members asked, how much of it can be called a meritocracy when obviously students come in with all kinds of advantages or disadvantages based on race, socioeconomic background, or the like? Even without the criminal or quasi-criminal activity, how do you think about what admissions meritocracy? It's obviously a difficult question.
Well, we could do hours on that, and that's something I think that the American educational system has struggled with for decades, and first trying to make tests not more favorable or unfavorable based on ethnicity or upbringing and all of that. I don't know the answer to that question. I think that, again, Jeff, this is something you would know way more than I would, coming out of and being an educator and a college president, former college president, and all of that. I don't know the answer to how you make college admissions a true meritocracy, or even if it's possible.
Yeah. Well, believe me, these are questions which are profound, and I'm grateful for the audience for asking. Another question along this line, do you think there should be preferences to athletes in the college admissions process? Is that recognizing an attribute? Is that another subversion of the meritocracy? How do you think about that?
My view of that is that if the athletes meet the minimum standards, so that on the predictors that are used at certain places, it's predicted that they will graduate. I have no problem with setting aside slots or the women's lacrosse team, the men's football team, the tennis. I have no problem with that. I have a problem if if it has happened many places over the years, they accept doctored high school transcripts or otherwise shoehorn into a college system student athletes who just are never going to graduate. Now, we have the situation now where college athletes will be able to be paid for endorsements and things. This is coming online very, very soon. How that changes all of this, I don't know. We're going to this kind of semi-pro system, but it certainly merits study.
Paul, you also explore the ethics of the legal system, the law profession. You've been writing about lawyers now for 30 years. And you've obviously, I'm sure, interacted with hundreds, if not thousands, of lawyers, maybe defendants alike. How's your impression of the legal system? And you're a former lawyer, you're a lawyer yourself. How has your impression of the legal system changed as you've written all of these books?
Well, I've always been fairly cynical, but as Lassiter says in Cheater's Game and elsewhere, he calls it the so-called justice system. And if the law and justice are related, they're at best distant cousins. Justice is this ideal. It's not something you can wrap up in a briefcase and take to court. It's fairness, equity, an ideal. Law, the legal system, is a machine. It's the operating equipment. So you throw all these cases into it and they get churned up in the machine, and what gets spit out sometimes is fairness and equity and a just result. Many times it's not. So it would be hard to be around the justice system and to practice law as I did for 17 years and now written about it for 30 years and not have a certain amount of, I would call it, healthy cynicism, healthy skepticism about what goes on.
What do you hear from lawyers? What do they tell you?
First of all, lawyers have a great sense of humor. May not always be apparent, but lawyers don't mind being poked fun at, usually. In Miami, where I practiced, our old county courthouse was an old limestone tower. It's still there. And in the winter, birds from Ohio circle around it. They're turkey vultures. And of course, the lawyers drive to the courthouse. So my very first book, To Speak for the Dead, 30 years ago, still in print, I dedicated the book to the hellish paradise of Miami, where vultures circle the courthouse, some on wings and some in Porsches. And I had lawyer friends who drove Porsches. They loved that. Oh, that's cool. I'm a vulture. We eat what we kill. It's another legal expression. We eat what we kill means, you gotta bring the raw meat in.
This is Jeff Herbst, president of American Jewish University, talking with best-selling author Paul Levine about his book, his new novel, Cheater's Game, about the college admissions scandals as part of our Biachad Together, spirited by AJU online platform. We have a few minutes left, so please continue to send me your questions. Paul, what do you think of the reaction of colleges and universities, especially the ones that were directly influenced? Do you think they were ashamed, abashed? Did they shrug it off too easily? What's been your impression of how, obviously we're not tried, but they were implicated by at least some of their employees?
Yeah, and I think it was humiliating. And then in many of the cases, and this would involve UCLA and USC, I don't know, I'm not picking on USC. I know many, talking to a Los Angeles crowd here, and I know the way it breaks down, the UCLA people don't like the USC and vice versa. But both of them had to produce documents. And the documents revealed that there were different drawers in the in the file cabinet. At UCLA, for example, there was a drawer, and I'm using a drawer, you know, metaphorically here, for VIP applicants, the children of major donors and legacies, and they would be treated differently. And I think everybody's always known this. This is not a great revelation, but if you combine that with, oh, one of your coaches or one of your admissions officers is taking bribes, it's unseemly and it's embarrassing. And I do think, also in response to that earlier question, that this is a spur to put some controls in place to prevent this sort of thing.
Do you think do you think it'll change? Or as one of our audience members said before, do you think people will just become more subtle and this will drive it more underground?
I don't know the answer to that. I do think, as colleges have been struggling for decades to try to achieve diversity, to try to achieve fairness. Somebody asked about the athlete. Well, I could also ask if somebody is a violinist, an 18-year-old violinist who's been taking lessons for 14 years since she was 4 years old and has the potential to be a world-class violinist, but she's not great at math or whatever. Should we have a place for her? We have a great music school. Yeah, I'd say yes to that too. So these are really hard to lay down hard and fast rules.
Paul, you gave a teaser before about what comes next for the Lassiter family. Can you talk at all about what comes after Cheater's Game?
Well, Cheater's Game is on the shelf. I'm just toying with ideas right now, but Kip is certainly going to be back. Dr. Melissa Gold has to be back because she's Lassiter's fiance and treating physician. And there will be a new adventure that hopefully will raise issues that we can talk about another day.
Well, I would enjoy that and appreciate it very much. Paul, you became a best-selling author as a second career after, as you said, well more than a decade of practicing law. Can you tell us how that came about? Was it always a dream to be an author? Did you stumble into it? How did it happen?
I was a partner in a really big law firm, a national law firm that these days has 2,000 lawyers, international law firm that in those days had 1,000. And I probably was not the best fit for a big bureaucratic place with a lot of rules. And I actually had gotten a promotion of sorts when they put me in charge of all of the asbestos defense cases east of the Mississippi River. And as we all know, asbestos was a poisonous substance, and the manufacturers had entered into a secret agreement to keep it secret that it was. And I was going to be tasked with leading a team to defend against claims against our manufacturer and others. And I came of age during the anti-war movement, the student power movement, and it just seemed to be something that I wasn't suited for. So instead of going to see a shrink or a professional counselor, I sat down and started writing a piece of fiction about a lawyer named Jake Lassiter who wouldn't take the kind of stuff that I would take in a law firm, and realized he had to be a solo practitioner. And I knew I was in the wrong place, and I decided to be a storyteller.
That's a great story. We could obviously talk a lot longer about college admission, football, and everyday morality. Alas, our time has come to an end. This is Jeff Herbst, President of American Jewish University. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you, Paul, about Cheater's Game, about the ethical issues that the book spends so much time exploring. as well as these other issues which have captured the nation's attention. So thank you so very much. Anything finally you want to say to your many fans out there?
Yeah, Jeff, I just want to thank you. As I said in the beginning, I thought we were going to have some fun. I think we had some fun, and I hope that some of your listeners will enjoy the tales of Jake Lassiter.
Thank you so much. And we hope also that you'll continue to follow the B'Yahad Together, spirited by AJU online platform. Please visit us at aju.edu. Some of you will be receiving a survey as to how we can further improve the platform. A survey takes about 3 minutes to complete, and we very much would appreciate your views. Paul, thank you so very much, and thanks as always to our audience.